there is going to be a failure to deliver, and that will be a sight to behold.
They now have to keep printing or we crash.
We've got this ticking time bomb.
Talking gold with the one and only Andrew Maguire.
Welcome to Live from the Vault.
Hi there, my name is Shane Moran and I'll be your host on this episode of Live from the Vault. So welcome to the show that goes beyond the headlines and uncovers the truth about the precious metals industry and the effects on the global economy in these historic times. We have exclusive access to experts and insiders, and we reveal information and insights that you simply won't find anywhere else. Now, this week, we have the one and only Andrew Maguire, precious metals expert and whistleblower in the vault. And to help him pull back the curtain in these historic times, we'll be joined by a returning guest and a Live from the Vault favorite, because by popular demand, it's you, our Live from the Vault community, that requested Mr. Bill Holter. That's right, Mr. Bill Holter is in the vault, and you're not going to want to miss a word of this conversation. So just before we introduce our featured guest here and head over to the UK with Andrew, please help keep spreading the word about this channel by hitting that like button there and share the information out there. And if you haven't already done so, you can subscribe and click on that bell if you want to be notified as each episode goes live, and we'll do just that. For those who haven't already met Mr. Bill Holter, for the very few that haven't already met him, let me just give you a sneak preview here and tell you a little bit about Bill. Bill was a stockbroker for 23 years and a branch manager for 12 of those years, and he retired and moved his family out of the U.S. to Costa Rica in late 2006. And then he returned to Texas. He was a contributing editor for the GATA since 2007 and began writing for Miles Franklin. He then joined with Jim Sinclair and the Holter Sinclair collaboration from 2015 to 2022. Now, Bill is a precious metals expert. You're going to love this conversation, of course. He's a broker and he clears through Miles Franklin, and his work can now be found. It's easy to remember. It's billholter.com. That's www.billholter.com. You can go over and visit him there and find out more information. And with that, let's head over to the UK and talking gold with the one and only Andrew Maguire and our special guest, Mr. Bill Holter. Over to you, Andy.
Well, thanks, Shane, for the introduction. And it is really a real privilege for me to have Bill Holter back. Everyone knows Bill. If you haven't seen him before, you haven't lived. It's all the way from Texas. This time it looks like we've got some better signal to have you. I remember we had some signal problems before, or maybe they just didn't like what you were about to say.
No, I'm out in the middle of nowhere. I work off of a dish, and sometimes it depends on the weather.
You know, it's interesting because you're obviously Texas based. David Tice, who created that Grid Down, Power Up movie, really opened my eyes as to probably why you want to be actually where you are, away from a lot of the hustle and bustle of the cities. So, Bill, how are you preparing yourself for eventualities that might come down the pike? Because a lot of people ask me, you know, obviously we're in the gold and silver world. We understand that. And we'll look at that
Right.
a lot closer, obviously, because talking about wealth protection, and I really want to talk to you about silver as well. But kind of what would you suggest that people would? How should they prepare themselves?
Well, as you mentioned, the hustle and bustle of cities, you definitely want to be away from cities. You want to be away from highly populated areas. I think my nearest neighbor is probably a kilometer from me. Back in early 2020, just as COVID was getting started, it was probably early February when I started hearing about it. And I thought to myself, if this is going to spread worldwide, my thought process was, and it turned out it was not correct, but my thought process was they're going to use the pandemic as an excuse to tank or destroy the financial system. And I made the decision right then and there. I mean, I was fairly rural at the time, but made the decision we needed to get out and get out right then and there. So I bought a ranch, which had all kinds of infrastructure, but the infrastructure was not in good shape. So it probably took me pretty close to a year to get everything up and running. The first thing I did was change out AC units, fix, repair the two wells. I put two solar systems in, and then basically, from there, really built supplies. I've got a pond. I'm now a chicken farmer. We've got a couple greenhouses, and actually a week ago week and a half ago, we had a tornado touchdown on my property. So I spent about a week cleaning up. Got to repair the chicken coop, repair the greenhouses, but that's small potatoes compared to what I've already done.
Well, that brings to mind there must be a wily coyote or around somewhere with your chickens nearby.
Yeah, but I mean, being out and really rural, there's food everywhere. I mean, there's wild turkeys, there's deer, there's wild hog. So I'm sure that population will get culled.
Well, Bill, before we dig into gold and silver, I couldn't believe it. I didn't look at this until a couple of days ago. It's been 16 years since the Fed fumbled in an attempt to fix things in 2008. I mean, if it was possible to distill the essence of what's gone wrong since then, what would you say?
Well, they've done absolutely nothing to fix the problem, and all they did was increase the programs, the policies that led up to the problem. So now the problem is many multiples of what it was back in 2008, 2009. And even in 2008, 2009, it was almost mathematically impossible to fix without a complete collapse and basically default of the system. But we're at the point now where there is no policy whatsoever that can fix where we are now. The only thing that can fix it is to completely tear it down and restart with a new monetary order. And that's what it looks like is happening. That's what it looks like the rest of the world is doing and planning for with the BRICS currency.
Yeah, and I think this is something I've just been focusing on this because we have a very good contact, very close contact, who's been organizing a lot of these BRICS meetings. And obviously it brings to mind Glasniev's gold-backed currency, the percentage of gold that's backing that, probably estimated at 45%. But I think what most people haven't realized is that it's actually been beta tested. And funnily enough, it started being beta tested, blockchain beta tested on about the middle of February. And I'm not saying that's where the $450 rally came from, but at the margin, as we know, at the margin, this paper to physical balance is critical. And it doesn't take much 96% leveraged gold exiting the COMEX to actually be forced to be physically settled in the Basel III compliant FX markets and delivered outside the ring fence. It doesn't take an awful lot at the margin to cause a breakout. And I'm just, obviously there's many factors to the breakout, but to me, it's no coincidence, I don't think.
Yeah, actually, Andrew, I think if you go back and you look at a chart versus a calendar, you'll see that the bottom was in late October, early November. And that's when the United States first started talking about taking the $300 billion that they've sequestered from Russia. And I guess it was yesterday or the day before, they they're talking about using 50 billion of that collateral to make a loan to Ukraine. I mean, that is it's a declaration of war, is what it is. And if you think like the Chinese, and obviously there's a big connection between China and Russia, the best way to win a war is let your opponent implode. Of course, you can help your opponent implode, but that's, I think, exactly what's happening. And you know very well, Andrew, that silver is the Achilles heel to gold, and then go one step further, gold is the Achilles heel to the Western currencies. So, this talk of basically stealing the 300 billion from Russia, in my opinion, that's where this rally really started, and what this rally is all about is de-dollarization.
Yeah, and looking at the more recent stuff that's going on, I think the very fact that what you're referring to, the Sino-Russia BRICS Alliance, it actually it has to pose the single largest threat to undermine this multifaceted globalist agenda, that really relies on a unipolar status quo. And I think, in my opinion, that's why we're evidencing such irrational desperation in trying to effect a regime change in Russia, the lack of wanting to even discuss this, an end to the war, even to discuss it. If it threatens, even if it threatens an unthinkable World War III, it just cuts right through that narrative.
Yeah, it does. And I've urged people ever since February of 2022, when the Ukraine war started, I've urged people to actually read Putin's speeches. He's not a madman. I think if you read, and I think he's done 6 or 7 now public speeches since then. If you read those, there's logic in there. He's not a madman. And I find very little that I disagree with. I think really, I think the guy is a businessman, and I think you can do business with him. But if you don't hold up your end of the deal, you're a dead man. But I do think that I do think the man's handshake is good. I mean, that's just my personal take, just based on the things that he has said, reading his speeches. He just makes common sense, uses logic, and I think he just wants to do business, but he wants to do business and be settled on fairly. And the dollar is basically the never pay model. And when I say the never pay model, you get paid in dollars with treasuries. You get promised more dollars, and ultimately you never really get paid. You never really truly settle the trade.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think one with an open mind. I mean, any time we see a single narrative, whether it was the lockdowns or whatever, any single narrative has to be challenged. And I think when you cannot challenge it, it really gets obvious. It starts to make you really start to smell a rat. And I think, as you say, anything I've heard is a very pragmatic man. Let's face it, and it wasn't him doing anything. It was in NATO has moved 1,000 miles closer to Russia, and then a week before the military operation, there was something like 4,000 shells into Donetsk, which is, right, in other words, Ukrainians killing Ukrainians, but there happened to be Russian ethnicity. And so he invoked, I think it's Article 51 or 52, whatever it is, to literally come and protect those people he had a right to protect. So I think one can't even be seen to be talking about that because Russia bad, everyone else is good.
Yeah, and I mean here we can go out into the weeds or not, but I mean look at other things. COVID, for example, the vaccines, for example. If you didn't agree, if you were, if you didn't agree, they called you an anti-vaxxer, racist, homophobic, whatever. That's what they do is when there is something that needs to be debated, there's no debate. You either, you either follow the official narrative or, you're a crazy. I mean, we're seeing it in the elections here in the U.S., and I'm not so sure we're going to have an election, but I mean, we're seeing it here in the U.S. If Trump wins, that's the end of democracy. I mean, I don't get it. What is democracy? Is it their own personal democracy, or is it democracy for all? I mean, there's so many different topics we could talk about where you're not allowed to debate because, well, and as they say, trust the science. The decision's already been made. Well, it turns out now, trusting the science was all complete bullshit. I forget who it was that just pulled like 11,000 peer-reviewed papers because they weren't peer-reviewed. They were reviewed by AI.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking, what would happen now? Let's assume. I mean, let's assume the your elections go without problems, without any dispute, and it's certainly you just look at the numbers. I mean, it's pretty clear that Trump is winning hearts and minds, and he's winning the black vote, the Hispanic vote. He's winning, essentially he's winning people who are disillusioned with this democracy, as you just outlined it, the word democracy. Whose democracy? Absolutely right. And yet, as you say, what's democratic about not being able to even have a free speech argument where we can both disagree? But to be shut down, even have that point where we can learn from each other, and one of it, we may walk away with this different opinion. We may walk away with maybe a little bit of a meeting of opinions, but it's incredible to me. So if Trump, I guess the question is, if Trump does become president of the USA, first thing is, what do you think? I mean, obviously we've got the weaponized services, your DOJ and your CIA and all that kind of stuff. So it worries me when you tackle those kind of people anyway in the first place, as per Kennedy. But if he gets in, perhaps, personally, from the perspective of the Fed, do you think he would actually dissolve the Fed? Is it something he might do?
Yeah, I've heard talk of that. In my opinion, the Fed's going to have to go away anyway. I mean, they are insolvent at this point. They've lost more on their bond holdings than what their equity was. So they're an upside down entity lending to another insolvent upside down entity, the U.S. Treasury. And the question is, who's going to lend? I mean, the U.S. can't open its doors on the first fiscal day of the year ever because they've got to borrow, $1.5 trillion, $2 trillion additional just to keep the game going. I mean, it's an obvious Ponzi scheme. And the problem with Ponzi schemes is you always need new money. And the problem is, where is the Treasury going to get the new money to borrow? And it's going to be the Federal Reserve, which is the lender of last and only resort. I mean, you've seen China selling down their Treasury portfolio. Japan is no longer accumulating. It's it's smoke and mirrors at this point. So from a mathematical standpoint, the Fed is going to go away. And I do want to comment, I don't think it's even a 50-50 chance that we have an election. The math is so bad now in the system, and I've said for years that they would need something to point at as to why the system collapsed. In other words, they need something to kick the table over and say, well, our plans were working, everything was great, except for this. And unfortunately, this looks like it's going to be World War III because the West is pushing as hard as they can to escalate the war.
Well, clearly they are. Clearly they are. Some of the, as you say, without digging too deep into the weeds. I mean, when you see, they talk about Ukraine being, up to whether Ukraine uses.
It's a money laundering operation, is what Ukraine is.
Yeah,
that's a money laundering operation. The end. I mean, we send billions over there, and billions come back and end up in pockets of probably even legislators.
So when I hear, I mean, we see in the UK, we hear a lot about this. For example, we've given long-range Storm Shadow missiles to Ukraine. Now, for someone to operate those, you have to be a specialist, and you're certainly not a Ukrainian. And so that means that a NATO member is actually using those weapons to target inside Russia. That is about as dangerous as it gets. And that is why Putin very pragmatically said, well, let's just prepare in case of a nuclear war. Let's have some exercises and send up all our planes that are armed. Because what kind of a message are they sending here? Bill, I'm as worried as you. Do you think they're crazy enough to trigger annihilation?
I don't know if it's crazy enough. I mean, it's obviously insane to think like that. But again, the financial system is set up as call it a rape and pillage system. And that's going on for, years. I mean, literally several hundred years with fractional reserve banking. And we're at the point now where the math no longer works and the math is going to implode the system. So yeah, they have to cover their tracks. They have to be able to say, well, it wasn't our fault. It wasn't my fault. It was, everything was fine except for World War III. And it's interesting, Putin, and it makes sense that he said this, that now that Britain is sending the arms and going to send the support to be able to operate those systems, now he's saying that, any and all British targets are targets. So, I mean, it's escalating. And the next 3 to 6 months is going to be crazy. And I say 3 to 6 months because that's leading up to the election, and that's another variable.
Yeah, interestingly, the US is pulling the strings from a great distance. And you've got France, the UK, you've got Europeans talking about let's arm, let's send these weapons, let's start hitting Russia. I wonder if it kind of suit the US to see Europe getting hit. Ultimately, it serves their agenda.
Well, is it really the U.S. pulling the strings, or is it something, well above the U.S.? I mean,
yeah,
you could go right to the top and say Satan's pulling the strings. I mean, you've got the WEF, intertwined all over the world, and it's basically globalism versus populism. So I disagree a little bit with saying it's the U.S. pulling the strings. I think the U.S. is having its strings pulled, and you've got more than half the country at this point that, believe in populism and believe in United States first.
Yeah. So this is really interesting stuff, and I think it is scary, as you say. So I think it kind of leads on to, well, what is there for us to do, Bill? We obviously we have to take responsibility for every one of us. It's our duty to take responsibility for us and our families. And so the first thing we need to do is have be self-sufficient in the sense that while they debase the currencies and while they implode the system, there's only two things that will help us, gold and silver. They can't destroy that. Every single piece of energy that ever went into each of those coins, bars, gold and silver, are in it. And it'll be the ultimate barter tool to survive when everyone else goes to the bank machine and finds there's no money in it.
Well, owning gold and silver on their own does not guarantee your survival. I would say what you need to do is you need to think it all the way through to protect yourself, to protect your family, because no one else is going to do that. And yes, gold and silver are important because you're getting your cash balances, your capital out of the system. And I mean, if you've got brokerage accounts, you want to get those stock certificates. The great taking is absolutely real. Everything was footnoted. Those laws are already in place, and they're not going to put laws in place like what they put in place and not use them. They're going to tank the system. There's going to be banks going under all over the world, brokers going down all over the world, and the mass population is going to be bailed in all over the world. People are going to be left with no capital whatsoever, and then you'll see the population start begging for a central bank digital currency so that they can get a monthly stipend, so that they can buy some bread each month. You really need to think your plan out as to where your location is, get your capital out of the system. Can you protect your location? Do you have the ability to grow food? Do you have the ability to hunt? Have you stocked up on food? I mean, people are saying, well, you should have, a couple months worth of food. I don't think 2 months is going to be anywhere near what you're going to need. I think this thing could go down for a year, 2 years, and we're not going to see it start coming back up toward, quote, normalcy. It could be 3 or 4 years. Who knows? But it is going to be a mass depopulation event because we're not hunters, we're not farmers. Those skills from 100 plus years ago, those are gone, and people are used to just getting in their car, going to the grocery store, and picking up what they want, or go to a fast food place or whatever, and they live day to day with their food. The WEF has been clear that they want to depopulate the earth down to 500 million people. Well, that could include war, obviously include famine, and the way to famine is to create supply chain kinks, which they've been doing. And all you've got to do is tank the system, shut credit off, and then nothing moves. Then you're going to find out pretty shortly, within 3 months, 6 months, who planned and who didn't. And again, I think it's important. One of the things a lot of people forget about, they think they've planned, but you need to be able to protect your position and what you have.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think, hopefully we're not looking back in the rearview mirror and listening to these words on the other side of that scenario. As you say, all we can do is do what we can. Now, obviously, if you're living in a city, it's not going to be a pretty thing.
It's over. If you live in a city, it's over. You're not going to make it.
I get that. So in the meantime, I think one of the, I always like to think of some of the things that are going right. Your sound money movement in America gives me a great deal of hope when you have your state and many other states now, and an increasing number of states who view gold and silver as money. And I think the sound money movement seems to be catching on, and even with the discussion of, well, we'll never allow a central bank digital currency to exist. But I suppose if there is all hell breaks loose, as you say, and you need bread, you might download that app.
Yeah, I'm sure many will. And the timing, the timing of the real money movement that you're seeing in the various states, it's coinciding with gold, silver, the mining shares breaking out to the upside. Mm-hmm. Gold's at new highs. Silver broke above $30. And I did put an article out a couple of weeks ago suggesting that this was going to happen. Silver over $30, you saw it get hit, soften and correct a little bit last week, corrected down to what, 30, 20, 25, thereabouts. And then yesterday it was up $1.50 when COMEX was closed, but yet the rest of the world traded. So that was people woke up yesterday morning to a giant margin call. And that margin call on top of the week before COMEX raised margins in silver. So it was a double whammy for the shorts. And it looks to me like the shorts are going to be taken out. The physical markets have taken over. You can see, $40, $50 premium in Shanghai over both COMEX and London, and a $3 to almost $4 premium in silver. That's over 10%. That is creating arbitrage. And I think the last time I was on and spoke with you, we talked about arbitrage. And that's what's happening, is that the physical inventories in the West are being drained. And at this point, it's like a heavyweight boxer fighting a lightweight, and the lightweight is paper and the heavyweight is physical. And, physical is moving the market. And then, let's see what the shorts, the paper shorts can do. They come in, they try to hit it, and they get taken right back up. So it's certainly a losing battle now for the paper shorts, because the more and more they sell, the longs know that they can't lose. The longs know that they control the physical markets, are starting to control the pricing mechanism. So there's no fear in the physical markets that, oh my God, they're going to come in and smash it down again. The smashes have gotten shorter and shorter, shallower and more shallow. And we're going to get to the point where, and I've talked about this for at least 10 years, there is going to be a failure to deliver. And that will be a sight to behold. When that failure to deliver happens, the entire financial system will come down. You'll be looking at, God knows, you could be looking at four-figure silver very quickly. And I always caution, be careful what you wish for, because when the financial markets come down, your way of life will completely change. And it'll go from, living the good life to purely survival.
Last time you were on, and you opened my eyes on something, because I never thought about it before. You mentioned that silver may well be the fuse that triggers a daisy chain collapse of the banking system.
Right.
I think I remember that correctly.
Yeah,
exactly. And yet silver is leading this entire rally at this point.
Right. Well, silver is more volatile than gold, and it makes sense because it's a smaller market. And it being a much, much smaller market, it's much easier to manipulate. But I mean, going back throughout history, silver moves up and moves down faster than gold does. The problem now, because everything is financialized, and you've got these short positions that are basically being margin called. Yes, silver's leading, and it has been leading now for the last. I mean, the ratio's down to 73 from it was over 90 just month and a half ago. So silver's definitely outperforming, and silver is, as I said, I've been saying, is the fuse to the gold market. I mean, you couldn't have $100 silver and gold not go higher than where it is now. Yeah, and the real danger is that gold is the antithesis, if you will, to fiat money. It's the anti-dollar. It's real, and the fiats are printed by man. They're not real. They don't have any real value other than the fact that governments mandate that you use their currencies. So you really couldn't have, say, 5 or 10 or $25,000 gold and the fiat system remain as it is. I mean, if you had 5, 10, $25,000 gold, you would have interest rates going much, much higher because confidence would be breaking in the sovereign debt that not only does the world run on, but sovereign debt, particularly U.S. treasuries, are the foundation to the entire system. And that foundation is pure, it's a mirage, it's sand. If you go back to what happened during the Depression, you didn't have a system-wide failure because the money was still good. And the money theoretically was still good until 1971 when the U.S. went off the gold standard. Then it's, from that point forward, it's been clown money.
Yeah. And as you just pointed out, essentially what's happening is because the physical markets are being settled outside of this CME, LBMA ring fence, this 50 years of control, it's because it's being settled outside, and because what essentially is happening, and I think this is what's happening, is that they're forcing this Western cartel, who has been in control for so long, to actually ultimately be price takers as opposed to being price makers.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to keep in mind the difference in price. I mean, if you can buy silver and have it delivered in the West at $32, and you can turn around and sell it at $36. I mean, you know this very well because you do institutional business. I mean, if there's over a 10% arbitrage, that's going to drain the physical supplies pretty quickly. And I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, which price is the real price. Is it really 32 or is it really 36? Well, if somebody's willing to pay 36 for it, that's the real price.
Yes. No, I get it. And by the same token, someone who has physical silver are not going to sell it to you for 32 bucks.
Right, exactly. And it's interesting. India has become a huge buyer of silver. Just this calendar year, they've become a huge buyer. The Silver Institute, which puts out the supply and demand numbers, it's really odd that they've pretty much, until just recently, they pretty much left out solar demand. Well, solar demand worldwide has got to be what? 300 million ounces, a third of global production. And on top of that, this was little, there was almost nobody talked about this. I think it was about a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago, China made a directive to their population to buy silver because it's cheap in relation to gold.
Interesting. And you know what? How many people that you know, other than the circle that we are in, I wonder how many people have even thought of that. If you're just a COMEX trader, paper trader, you have no clue. This is like double Dutch to them because they don't know anything outside of what is seen in the paper-centric pricing mechanism.
Right, and they wake up every day and their goal is to earn dollars.
Yeah.
When the reality is, when all is said and done, you're going to count your net worth in ounces, not dollars, not euros, not pounds, not yen. It'll be how many ounces of gold, how many ounces of silver do you have?
Yeah, I think this is such an interesting time. I feel, as much as there's risks, I feel privileged to be living in this time because it does offer us the opportunities to make decisions, and I think good decisions. And I think this is why these sessions are so important, Bill. This is why it's nice to listen to the other side of things, to hear all the opinions, and then you make up your own mind. But at least you have the data, at least you have information. People may not agree with me or you, but the point is, what we're saying is what we see, and all we can do is say what we see, and hopefully it prompts some good choices. That's to me what these sessions are all about.
Yeah, I think you're right. This is a very, very interesting time to be alive. There's more change. I call it concentrated change in current day than at any point in time on this planet. And the change is upending many status quos, if you will, that have been in place for literally hundreds of years. I mean, it's going to be really interesting, obviously, to find out what happens with currency. It's going to be really interesting to find out what happens with banking. I mean, if banks go down and bail everybody in, are they going to get a second shot at it? Will there even be banking? It's going to be interesting to see how this works out. And yeah, it's interesting times, but again, and when I say be careful what you wish for, this is going to upend pretty much everything, the way of life as we've known it our entire lives.
Yeah, this is so true, and I think so just while we're talking about options, we never really discussed. What's your thoughts on Bitcoin? Do you see it as a fellow traveler, or what do you see it as?
I see it as digital air, and in my opinion, and I could be entirely wrong. First off, let me just say that the blockchain is a perfect accounting system, but because the cryptocurrencies are basically digital nothings, it's accounting for nothing. What we've seen has been a far greater craze than the tulip craze. So my opinion is Bitcoin, digital currencies, they are digital air, in my opinion, and we'll I think eventually find out. I think that the cryptocurrencies were basically a CIA backed or started idea as a way to steer fear capital that's trying to exit the fiat system away from gold and away from silver, just as the ETFs were back in the early 2000s. They steered capital away and into paper, if you will, into the ETFs, and acted as a relief valve for the pressure that was building up in the gold and silver markets, which, again, if you have $10,000, $20,000 gold, that is a vote of no confidence on a system that runs 100% on confidence.
Well, I really buy that. What I buy is the argument that you just made, that ETF gold is an illusion, and it was actually part of the whole reason that COMEX was set up in the first place after Nixon took gold off the standard was to create volatility and add synthetic supply and create chaos. So as you say, then they bring in an ETF that's linked directly to the COMEX, and you can exchange it with this ETF. And there is no guarantee there's any bullion in there. Do you remember that day, going back a bit, where Bob Pisani from CNBC went into the HSBC vaults in London and picked up a bar?
Right.
And showed it, see, it's here. And that bar number related to somebody else's ETF. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. And I also remember Steve Mnuchin going into Fort Knox, coming out, and his statement verbatim was, gold is good. He didn't say the gold is good. He just said gold is good. Well, tell us something we don't know. Is all the gold there? No, there's no way. Mm. Why have they not had an audit since 1956? Because and their explanation originally was, oh, well, it would be too expensive to audit it. I mean, they build billion-dollar bridges to nowhere. And you're probably talking, I don't know, what would an audit cost? Maybe 25 million, 50 million? I mean, that's not even a pickle on a hamburger.
Yeah, and there's empirical evidence to prove that is correct, because they wouldn't allow the Bundesbank head to come into the vaults, refused, and furthermore, it's going to take 7 years initially to give back 300 tons of gold to the Bundesbank. So, I mean, if that isn't empirical evidence, I mean, if I went to a vault and I phoned my vault and said, I'm coming to pick up my bullion, and they said, oh no, you can't come in, and oh no, and we can't get it to you right away, I'd be down there with a shotgun. Right.
Andrew, that was back in, I think it was 2013. And I wrote an article on that.
Yep.
It was 300 tons, and they said, oh, it's going to take several years to do it because logistically it's not safe to move that amount of gold and blah, blah, blah. Well, I actually researched it, and a Boeing 747 cargo plane can hold 95 tons. So they could have done it in 4 flights, and they could have done it in 1 week.
We often see 25 tons of usually in silver, 25 tons put onto a cargo plane. As you say, even if it was only 25 tons at a time, it could have been done in a couple of weeks. Worst case scenario.
And don't forget that when Germany got their gold, it was not their original gold.
Yes.
The serial numbers did not match. So, and I had that happen to me. I deposited early 2000s into the Delaware depository, and I put 2001 coins in. And when I was leaving the country, I wanted to ship metal, get it out of the U.S. I sent it to Switzerland, and when it arrived, it was 2005 coins. So what happened to my coins? What happened to the German gold? It was lent out. And I get this kind of a little bit off the subject, but think to yourself, how can you do a trade? It doesn't matter what size, $1,000, $100,000, $1 million, $100 million trade for $7.95 with a broker, $7.95. What business model, in what world could that business model work? Where they have these big, huge buildings, they've got thousands of employees, they're paying bonuses each year, but they're charging $7.95. No, that's not the business model. The business model is when you buy stock or anything, your broker immediately turns around and lends it out.
Yeah.
They rehypothecate it. And when they rehypothecate it, they're earning, pick a number, 5%, 7%, whatever the interest rate is. That's what the broker is earning. That's how the brokers have been making money, is by lending your stuff out.
And interesting that yesterday for the first time in 50 years, FX transactions, anything that touches the dollar basically, has to be settled on a T+1 basis. So while you can still play your games with stocks, etc., because the NSFR compliant first tier physical gold asset class in London, which is physically backed, has to be physically backed for it to be a first tier asset class, which trades alongside US Treasuries. Because and they've been trying to drag their feet. We just witnessed this. They wanted to wait till 2027. The LBMA and the rest of Europe is saying, no, we'll wait till 2027. We're not going to impose T+1. However, because FX gold and FX silver is a foreign exchange cross, it has to now be settled on a T+1 basis in London. And that's a physical settlement. I think this is going to be people. I haven't seen anyone talking about this. And it only happened yesterday for the first time. This is the first day, the 28th was the first day that T+1 hit only the FX side of the business. And that includes gold and silver. This is really bullish for silver. To me, silver has been in this huge flywheel for years. And suddenly we've got what we just talked about. The markets, the physical price being settled outside of the ring fence. And now you've got T+1. Yes, silver isn't NSFR compliant. It's not. It doesn't have to be physically backed. The liquidity providers don't have to have the physical. But as you say, you've just outlined an arbitrage trade. What greedy fella isn't going to trade that?
Yeah, the arbitrage is going to be the downfall. The fact that gold and silver have been traded in the West for years and years on a naked basis. The arbitrage is going to take care of that. And my question is to you, if Europe doesn't want to go to T+1 now, they want to wait till 2027, I would just simply ask why.
Yes, why? I'll tell you why. When I sat with the current Bank of England governor, Andrew Bailey, when he was the head of the FCA, with my member of parliament, and in an audited meeting, I said to him, well, what are you going to do about this unregulated market? He said, well, that's the point. It's unregulated. And I looked at him and said, well, hang on. You can't just leave it at that. What do you mean it's unregulated? Yeah. And what's being done about it? Well, basically, he said, well, what should I look for? I mean, I couldn't believe it. Could not believe it. That was on record. Unbelievable stuff to me. Yeah. Nobody knows.
It's the Wild West.
Yes. Yes. Bill, you know what? I have to thank you so much for joining us today. I know we've had some guys. If there's any kind of flickering, it's because we've had some satellite issues, and maybe it's the subject matter where they kept pulling your satellite feed. But we've covered some good stuff here. But Bill, how do people? Now you're a broker. You're a broker, and you provide physical to people, physical gold, silver. Is that coins, bullion? What is it? What range of bullion or of gold and silver do you provide?
Yeah, basically any type of metal. I mean, we do gold, silver, platinum, palladium, occasionally rhodium. And I do business all over the world, can deliver anywhere in the world as long as it's a safe place where insurance companies will insure the delivery. So yeah, I clear my business through Miles Franklin. If I did start my website just about a year ago, it's just simply billholter.com. And if you do want to get in touch with me, there is a contact button on the website, or you can go to my business email. It's bholter@proton.me.
And of course, we'll put that link in. And of course, I can attest you from everyone I've spoken to, have nothing but respect for you, Bill. And also Andy Scheckman from Miles Franklin. And, you know, these are good people. You're talking about good people here. And I think anyone that really wants to invest in gold and silver, wherever you are in the world, you know you're in safe hands, and you'll get good guidance as to how to best approach it, perhaps depending on how much money people want to spend, what may be the best asset class to get into, what percentage of gold or silver. People can ask questions. This is the beauty of it. People can come to you and ask your opinion of, well, if I was in your shoes, perhaps with that much money or this little much money, I would do X, Y, and Z. And I think this is such a valuable thing, because when people look back, they'll be glad that they spoke to you.
Well, Andrew, let me just finish with this. Everyone is born with only one good thing, and that's a good, clean name. How you die, how you pass, all depends on how you conducted yourself, whether you still have a good name or not.
Thanks, Bill. And it's been a blast. And obviously, really like to circle back on this maybe in another couple of months and see what if this election is going to happen, because you kind of worry me now, because I'm thinking, maybe it ain't going to happen.
Thank you, Andrew Maguire and Bill Holter, for another fascinating discussion. I'm sure everybody enjoyed that one. And remember, to our community, buy physical and make sure it's backed 1-to-1, and understand the difference between what Andy affectionately calls the casino paper gold and silver markets and the actual physical gold and silver markets. They're not the same. Don't be fooled, especially in these historic times. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's all we have for you today. Another episode from Live from the Vault. And please help keep spreading the word again about this channel. It really does help out the channel to reach more people by hitting that like button, sharing this information. And also, if you haven't already done so, you can subscribe very easily. And if you click on that black bell there, we will notify you in real time as each episode goes live. And with that, we'll see you right here next time on Live from the Vault. Bye for now.